Our winter small groups kicked off last week. It's a great way to get connected here, to just build relationships and friendships and all of that, and study together and learn together, grow together. And so I would encourage you to join one of those. There's still time this week. You can look at the different group offerings on the back wall in the foyer and sign up this morning. So I don't know about you, but I really dislike exclusive product claims. Like, we've discovered the secret and it is going to change your life, but only if you do it this one certain way, right? Like, use this one special workout regimen, or, this special diet shake, or this meal plan. And I especially dislike claims like this when it comes to parenting and parenting books. And I think it's because I have tried a lot of them, and they don't work for me. And so then I feel like a failure, and then I just get really bitter, and I'm like, well, forget you. You don't know me. Oh, yeah, guys, sorry, the offering. Always forget about the offering. Oh, thanks. You guys know. You got my number. All right. So I feel like a failure, and I'm like, your way isn't the only way. You don't know how this works. And I used to get really trapped in this kind of thinking. When I first started staying at home with our kids when they were babies, I had no idea what I was doing, like most moms. And so I started reading books. I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And every book I read felt like this weight on my shoulders. Like, every book claimed to have the magic answer to parenting bliss, and if I didn't do it just how they were telling me to do it, my kids were going to fail at life, and my marriage would fall apart. And one night, Michael came home, my husband, and I was reading this new book on how to be a great wife. And so I'm like, okay, just teach me, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm reading, and Michael comes in, and I'm like, I'm so sorry that I don't make you chocolate chip cookies when you get home from work. And Michael was like, what are you talking about? And so he comes over, he grabs the book out of my lap, and he chucks it in the trash. Like, no more, Lauren, we're done here. And think about it. Just think about some of the titles of parenting books. Like, for instance, this one, The Happiest Baby on the Block, okay, which claims to provide an automatic off switch for your baby's crying. Okay, I never found that switch. It was more like Maddest Baby on the Block in my house. Or another one of my favorites, a No Drama Discipline. Okay, I'm thinking, you don't know my daughters. There is no way you could write this book and know my daughters. Or this one, this is my favorite, Have a New Kid by Friday. How to change your child's attitude and behavior and character in 5 days. 5 days. I'm thinking, okay, the only way that is happening in my house is if we literally get a new child delivered to my house on Friday. Like, knock, knock, special delivery, here's your new kid with a new attitude. And all these books, they have good things, right? They have good tools and great insight, but they aren't the way. They're not the only way. And I think for me, and I think a lot of us, we all kind of rebuff against any claim like that. We write it off like, oh, okay, whatever works for you, good luck with that, but don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to do this. I will figure it out myself. I've got this. And we're right to feel that way a little bit. Because grand, inflated claims, they're one of the oldest marketing tricks in the books. Well, this morning, we find ourselves right in the middle of a very tough passage in John 14 with the ultimate exclusive claim. And it's Jesus talking now, not a pop parenting psychologist. It's Jesus. And he says this, John 14:6, I am the way. I am the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And what do we do with that? For some of us, this is kind of exciting, like, ooh, I like to be on the in crowd, and you like getting in on those exclusive claims and being an insider. I'm on the right path. This is telling me so. But for some of us, for others, it's positively disturbing. Like, how could Jesus say that? How could there be anything good about a God who is so narrow? A God who is so exclusive, who says my way or the highway. I mean, that's a kind of a jerk thing to say, right? When someone says that, we're like, oh, okay, that's kind of arrogant. But I want to look at the passage this morning a little deeper because I think there is actually some great news in it where we feel like, oh, really? You're the way, you're the truth, you're the life. I think there is great news in this. And so first, let's look at what does it mean that Jesus is the way? Jesus is the way. As it turns out, way in the English language can mean a lot of things. There are 22 definitions in Webster's of way. And way can mean road or route or highway or waterway. It can mean a direction, like, okay, I'm going this way, or I'm going to go that way. Or it can be an innuendo, like, I've heard you're in the family way, right? Circa 1700. Don't ever say that to anybody now. It can mean method or manner, as in do it my way. Do it my way. So what does Jesus mean? We have 22 definitions. Does he mean he's the highway to heaven? I think many of us assume so, right? As long as you claim Jesus as your way to heaven, you're all good. Doesn't matter how you show up here. As long as you claim him as your Savior and you pray a prayer and you sign on the dotted line, you're on your way to heaven. But there's more to it than that. In the Jewish world, way, the Hebrew way, was a reference to the way of righteousness, the way of the law. The way refers to a method or a manner of obedience to God, the way that you do that, the method. So when Jesus says, I'm the way, we have to ask, well, what does he mean? I'm the way. I'm the way to get out of hell free? Or I'm the way to live? Does he mean follow my highway to heaven? Or does he mean follow my manner, my method of life? Live as I live. Do as I do. Now, either way, we have this really tough claim, right? Jesus is predicting his death in this passage, and he's being questioned by the disciples. Where are you going? What do you mean? What are you talking about? What's going to happen next? How do we get there too? How do we follow you? And Jesus responds, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. No one comes to the Father, which is the way he's referring to God, except through me. So we'll come back to this in a little bit, but I want to move on to the next part of the passage in John 14, starting in verse 8. And if you need a Bible, you don't have one, you can raise your hand. Our host will come around and bring you one. But we're in John, and it will be up here too. John 14, starting in verse 8. Philip says this, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Show us the Father. And Jesus answers, don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. So let me tell you what I think is going on here. Jesus is saying, do not be troubled, because the disciples, they're on edge. And I think that Philip is about to lose his mind with Jesus. And they've left all the disciples. They've left behind their jobs, their relationships, a solid income to follow Jesus. And now it looks like everything is falling apart. Okay, all of this, everything they thought, the glory that they were going to get, it's all going to be over much too soon. And Jesus, he keeps talking about his death, his impending death. And they slowly realize he really means it. He's going to die. He's going to be killed. How could this happen? And they had been expecting this to go very differently. And so now they're sitting here and they're having this discussion. And if I were Philip, I would be thinking like, Jesus, I have had it with your riddles. I have had it with your parables, your obscure words. You've just told us that you are going to die. Okay, I cashed in my 401k for you. I gave up my seniority as a religious big shot at the synagogue. My career path is shot. I've got nothing. So for the love of God, can you once speak clearly and tell us what in the world you are talking about? Just show us this Father. Show us the Father, this God already, and we will be good. Okay, and so all of us, right, at some point we demand this, don't we? God, who are you? Just show yourself to me. What do you really like? It's a pretty big question to ask. It's an important question to ask, who God is to us, what we think he's like, or if we think he doesn't exist at all. I mean, that drives everything for us. It determines what our relationships are like, how we are in the world, our mission, our purpose, our churches. It shapes our entire worldview. Is God good? Is it even right to call him a him, or is what we call God more of a cosmic force, like energy or light? What about evil in the world? Is God responsible? Does he just arbitrarily unleash destruction? Are we just pawns to him? What could he possibly care or have to do with little old me or you? Philip says, just show us the Father. Show us this Father, this God who you say you're going to, and we'll be all set. And then Jesus makes this incredible claim. Don't you know me, Philip? Even after I have been with you for so long, I've told you 1,000,000 times. Why do I have to say this? But I will. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? Jesus is saying, if we have seen him, if we've seen Jesus himself, we have seen God. We've seen the Father. If we've seen Jesus, we have seen God. And think about how incredible that claim is. What if Jesus, the person of Jesus, was really all there is to understand about God? Not church, not religion, Jesus. What if everything we need to know about God is revealed in Jesus? And let's be honest, universally, everybody likes Jesus, right? Even people that aren't religious at all, they're like, yeah, Jesus. It's hard not to like Jesus because of the way he lived and what he did. If you don't like Jesus, I mean, there might actually be something a little wrong with you. He's a good guy, right? Everyone says that. Well, he's a good guy. Yeah, I mean, how he lived. So here's what Jesus is saying. You want to see the Father. You want to know God, what God is like, Philip? Open up your eyes. The last 3 years, everything you've seen me do, how you've seen me relate to people and be, look at me. I perfectly resemble God the Father. I embody all that you need to know, just me, my life, my actions, my words. Don't look anywhere else. Eyes on me. Me. Jesus says, the Father and I are one. The Father and I are one. Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Don't you believe I'm in the Father? The Father is in me. He said earlier in John 1:18, no one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father. The author of Hebrews writes in chapter 1, verse 3, the Son, Jesus, he's the radiance of God's glory. He's saying Jesus, the light of this world, is the splendor of his Father, the shining out of the Father's bright glory. And glory, that word is kind of like a church word. What does that mean? The glory of something here is its mass, its bulk, its makeup. What it's all about. And Jesus is the glory. He's the very makeup of God the Father, shining out into the world. He goes out from the Father, showing us exactly what the very being, what the very essence of God the Father is like. If you want to understand what God is like in a perfect representation, Jesus is saying to Philip or to us this morning, take a look at me. At me. Eyes on me. And this would have been a totally new concept for the disciples. God was not seen clearly before Jesus. You actually couldn't see him, at least all of him. I mean, even Moses, he says in Exodus 33, Moses is having this conversation with God, and he says, oh, I want to show me your glory. I want to see you. And the Lord says, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you. I'll proclaim my name. I'll have mercy on whom I have mercy. I'll have compassion on whom I have compassion. But you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Michael shared last week that the high priests in the temples in Jerusalem, they would go in to do sacrifices, and only the high priests were allowed in, and they would tie a rope on the ankle of the priests, in case they walked in and they were overwhelmed by God's presence and his glory, and they just died in there. And so they tied the rope on because nobody wanted to go on that rescue mission. And so they would pull the guy out if he were to die. Looking upon God was too much. He couldn't handle it. It could cause death. But in Jesus, all of that changes. Everything changes. God is for the first time seen clearly, holy. Everything up till this point has been obscured by man's interpretation and filtered through a human voice in the prophets. But in Jesus, we see fully what God is like. One of my favorite theologians of today, his name's N.T. Wright, and he says this: don't come with a set, fixed idea of who God is and try to fit Jesus into that. Look at Jesus. The Jesus who wept at the tomb of his friend, the Jesus who washed his followers' feet, and you'll see who is the true God. That was Jesus' answer to Philip. It is his answer to the natural questions that arise in people's minds today. And if Jesus is really all there is we need to know about God, well, then what does that reveal to us? What do we know? We know a lot of things, but two things that I think are the most important. Number one, we know that God is a father. Over and over, we see Jesus referring to God as his Father. Just in today's passage alone, we see Jesus referring to God as Father. His Father 10 times he says that. And then throughout the Gospels, especially in John, we hear it again and again and again. 30 times Jesus says, my Father. Stop turning my Father's house into a market, John 2. My Father is always at work to this very day, John 5. I am not alone, for my Father is with me, John 16. So this morning, I'd like to introduce you to somebody. This is my dog. He is a super cute golden doodle. And before you think, oh my gosh, how could you go right from saying God is my Father to here's my dog, just hang. Hang for a second. I promise we'll circle back. But this is my dog, and he's a humongous golden doodle, and he is awesome. And his name is Cody. And if I told you, oh yeah, here's my golden doodle named Cody, his name wouldn't really reveal that much to you about who he is, right? Like you might think, Cody, that name, he must be then, if he's a Cody, really good at catching frisbees and eating rabbit poop. Yeah, okay, yeah, and that'd be a really great guess, and you'd be right. But really, that'd just be a lucky guess, right? Like Cody, his name, that name Cody means nothing. It's just a name that we picked for the dog. But Father is a name, it's a title that means something, right? A father is called a father because he's a father. It means something, and a father in the purest, best sense is someone who out of an overflow of love gives life. A father must give out life to be a father. He begets children. That's who he is. It is his most foundational, fundamental identity. Love is not something that the father has, like one of his many moods. Rather, he is love. He could not love. If he did not love, he wouldn't be a father. And in 1 John, verses 7 and 8, John's the same one who wrote the Gospel of John. He writes another letter. He says, dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. Have you ever met anyone so kind and so loving that just being around them makes you want to become a better person? You think, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. You're like, I've got a lot of work to do, but I really want to be like them. John is saying people like that, they're like little pictures of God. This God, he says, is so loving. He's such love in such a profound and potent way that you simply cannot know him without becoming loving. This is exactly what it means for God to be Father. When John writes God is love, he's referring to the Father, and his very next words in verse 9 state, "This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son. The God who is love is the Father who sends his Son." So to be the Father means to love, to give out life, to beget the Son. Before anything else, for all eternity, this God was loving, giving life to and delighting in his Son. And just a quick aside for a minute, because someone asked me in the first service, well, that doesn't make God, why is it all God in the man part, and he's just a father? What about the mother and the importance of the mother? And that is a whole other sermon. But let me tell you, throughout the Bible, God is referred to in many different ways, feminine and masculine. Okay, so don't let that trip you up here. Like, what about the women? Okay, don't let that trip you up. We'll talk more about that at another time, but I just want to insert that there. Throughout the Bible, he's assigned all different characteristics, and it says men and women were both created in his image, men and women, okay, male and female. So first and foremost, we know that God is a father, not first and foremost creator, not first and foremost ruler, or even God in some abstract sense. He is Father. All the way. He's never not been a father. All that he does as a father. That is who he is. He creates as father. He rules as father. He loves as a father. So second, we see, and we talked a little bit about this already, that God is Christ-like. God is Christ-like. He looks and he acts and he thinks and he talks like Jesus. So here in our passage again, we have Jesus saying, "The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it's the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves." Colossians 1:15 says Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Everything Jesus does reflects what God is like. The stories he tells of extravagantly welcoming back the prodigal son, of leaving a flock of sheep to go hunting for the one that is lost, the story of the Good Samaritan, learning how to love and care for people who are different than us, the unmerciful servant and the importance of forgiveness, that there's no room for revenge and retaliation in God's kingdom. These don't just reflect Jesus' thoughts, like he just came up with them on his own. He says he's not even speaking on his own authority. They're his Father's thoughts. It's his heart. Those stories are his heart. And it wasn't just Jesus' stories that reflect the Father, but his actions. Washing feet, laying hands on a leper, eating dinner with down and outers, drinking water at the well with the Samaritan woman, the outsider, speaking tenderly to the outcasts, calling down judgment on the religious elites, showing mercy and extending forgiveness to the woman caught in adultery. And when Jesus is betrayed and arrested and mocked and beaten and dragged up the hill to Calvary, where he will be crucified, well, it's on the cross that we see the deepest revelation of God the Father. One who's willing to sacrifice it all, to give up his life, lay down his life to give life. The reformer John Calvin, he wrote, "In the cross of Christ, as in a magnificent theater, the inestimable goodness of God is displayed before the whole world. In all the creatures, indeed, both high and low, the glory of God shines, but nowhere has it shone more brightly than in the cross. And here is a glory that no other God would want. Other gods need worship and service and sustenance, but this God, a Father, perfectly represented in Jesus, needs nothing. He has life in himself, and so much so that it is brimming over. It is overflowing to his creation, to us, his children. So what do we know? We know that God is a Father. God is Christ-like. He looks and he acts and he thinks and he talks like Jesus. If we have seen Jesus, we have seen God. We have seen the Father. So now let's go back to the beginning, okay, the exclusive claim, I don't know, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life, that one. When Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life, he did not mean pray a prayer and you can get to heaven then. Doesn't matter what your life looks like here. This was a much more radical claim than that. He's saying, my ways, the way you've seen me live, the way I do life with people and I love people and I include people, those ways are the only ways that lead to life, here or in the next. If Jesus' ways are the only ways to life, it means that all of the other ways people attempt to seek life are dead ends. I mean, before Jesus, Philip and the disciples, they had it wrong. They thought the way meant religious exclusivity. We're the chosen people of God. Doesn't matter, how we treat anybody. We're just the chosen people. Some of them thought the way was theocratic power. Our God is going to take over this country and force you all to submit. But Jesus says, guys, you have it all wrong. It's not my way. Actually, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Only my ways lead to life, and they are not your ways. So if Jesus is the way, that means that all other religious ways are invalid. Like, for instance, the way of Jesus is not the way of religious extremism. Convert or die, right? We're the chosen ones. All others are damned, and we'll hold our signs up, and we will point at you, and we will tell you so. That is not the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus is not the religious, pious way, like, I'm just going to work really hard, and I'm going to serve, and I'm going to become a really good person, and then I'm going to look down at all of you, sneer at you, and say, look at what I've done. Look at me. It's not the way of Jesus. And the way of Jesus is not the way of self-actualization. Jesus never said, to thine own self be true. That was Shakespeare, and Jesus would totally reject it. He said, if you want to follow me, if you want to have real life, you actually deny yourself. You deny your own ways of doing things. You die to yourself. And the way of Jesus is not the American way. We are the chosen people, blessed by God with fabulous wealth, and we need to do everything we can to preserve and protect, no matter what the cost to any person, doesn't matter. We're armed with the most power, chosen to bring freedom and democracy to the whole world, God's chosen country. The Jesus way is not that. The Jesus way is not nationalism. The way of Jesus is not ethnic purity. It's not the ethnic purity way. None can claim that we are God's chosen race. And aren't you so glad that that's true? That's not Jesus' way. The way of Jesus is not the way of tolerance. You're like, what? What do you mean? That's like tolerance is the buzzword right now, right? But Jesus' ultimate hope for us as humanity isn't that we would just tolerate each other. Like, yeah, I guess I'll put up with you, but don't get too close, or I just don't think I'll be able to tolerate you anymore. You stand over there, and I'll tolerate you. Jesus calls us to radical love, to radical engagement, not just tolerance, but we would radically love and engage each other. Those who are different from us, not just our friends. Tolerance doesn't change the world, friends. Self-sacrifice, denying ourselves, humble love changes the world. And unlike the claims of our parenting books and weight loss plans, do you see what good news this is? How good this claim is. When Jesus says, I'm the way, that's not just some arbitrary claim, as if God said, all roads, they could lead up the mountain, but I feel like being really narrow and exclusive, so I'm only going to allow white Anglo-Saxon Protestants to come up the mountain. No. When Jesus says, I'm the way and the truth and the life, he means only my ways. How you've seen me live my life, all the stories, all the actions, those are the only ways that lead to life. The other ways lead to death. Do you get that? They all lead to death, not because God said so and he's really exclusive, because they simply do. If you put yourself first, your beliefs and your pleasure and your prerogative, your race, your nationality, even your own individual spiritual journey, the way of putting yourself first leads to death always. It's not Jesus' way. And when you die, it leads to the sort of permanent death that we call hell. And so on the one hand, Jesus is shockingly exclusive. No one comes to God but through me. My way, how you've seen me do life, my truth, my life. And yet he says, my way is also one of total inclusivity. Whosoever believes in me, anyone, will have a life of such substance and such depth and richness that it will survive even death and come out the other side. If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. In doing this, making Jesus your way, it means more than deciding he's your ticket for the railroad to heaven, right? It means like dramatic life change. Like everything changes. It's not about you anymore. Making Jesus your way means making him your way, your method of doing life. Oh, how should I approach this, or how should I do that? Well, what do I see? How did Jesus do that? How was he? How does this work? How does Jesus become more to us than just this ticket to heaven? How does he become our way? How we're characterized, who we are, how we act, how we think and talk and speak? Well, it begins with believing. It's the same that way we read with these guys, the disciples in the story, as we read right here in our passage this morning. Jesus says it starts with believing I am who I say I am. Do you believe that? And if you're not ready and you think, I'm not so sure, I'm climbing up my own path, I'm on the north side of the mountain, then you're in good company here. Because not all of these guys, the disciples, they weren't ready either. They didn't know. They weren't exactly sure who Jesus was, and especially now, all that he's talking about, they're like, oh, gosh, we don't know. It's a process of discovery, just walking with Jesus. And Jesus' invitation to Philip and to the other disciples was, and it remains today, just come along and see. Just come hang around. That's what I did. I came here about 18, 19 years ago. And this was really like the first church I had ever been to. And my life was a disaster. And I came in and I saw something in you that I wanted, that was different, that was beautiful, that gave me life. And I just kind of hung around. And I started to taste and see how good Jesus is because of you. How you were treating me and including me. So Jesus says, just come, have a taste, check it out, sit in the back, I don't care, just come. I mean, how does he become our way? I mean, it begins with believing in him, even if it's just a little and you're not sure, but maybe, and you stick around to check it out. And the next step is to follow. You begin to follow in his ways. It was actually said in those days in the Talmud, which is a book of Jewish law. The authors said they encouraged people to let the dust of their rabbis to cover them. So it would be they're walking so closely behind their rabbis that the dust from the ground would come up and it would cover them. Or they'd be sitting at their feet and the dust on the ground would come up and cover them. And it was this it was this honoring thing, like, look at all the dirt on me, right? I'm like following closely behind my teacher, my rabbi. That's what Jesus' disciples did. They left what they were doing to follow after Jesus, wherever he went, to do whatever he did, to learn whatever he had to teach them, like, cover me in your dust. I want to be that close. I want to know exactly what you're doing, like, get me really dirty. That's the invitation to us this morning, like, get dirty, folks. Like, let's get a little dusty. And our band's going to come up now, and as we close, I just want to emphasize that following God and getting to know him and starting to believe, it's not so much about gathering a bunch of information, which is important and we need to know, and theology is very important, don't get me wrong, but God is a father. And so by very nature, he's relational. He's inviting us into a relationship with him, not just to know about him, but to actually know him. Like you know your friends and your family. I mean, think about how that works. How did you get to know your best friend? Your coworkers, your spouse, your kids? Well, you spend time with them, right? You ask them questions and you get to know their friends and you include them and you start to just think about them and consider them. You want to please them, and you study them, like, oh, what do they like? What do they dislike? Their preferences, their priorities, their beliefs. You just start to investigate, right? And for some of us, we can start this morning in prayer just saying, God, I think I might be falling for you a little bit. I think I might be interested in you. I might even believe, like, a little bit. I like Jesus. I like how he lived. Who he was. Forget everything else. Forget church. Forget Christianity. But Jesus, I love. So would you just tell me, God, would you tell me some more things about yourself? I want to know you. I'd like to get to know you more. I'd like a little more of a taste and to see a little bit more. You could do that this morning and then just see what happens. That's what I did. Here I am. This could be you. You could read the Bible. You could, start in one of the Gospels. What was Jesus like? Learn more about that. Come back here on Sundays. Maybe you invite someone out to coffee who does follow Jesus, or join a small group. There's countless ways. But for others of us, I was thinking about this week. I think that some of us sitting in here this morning, we are squeaky clean. Like there is not a speck of Jesus dust on you. Maybe there never has been, but I think this is more for people who used to be really dirty. You used to be covered in dust. And for some reason, whatever it is, you've stepped aside and you've pulled back and you're not following so closely anymore. The invitation for you this morning is to get a little dusty again, to start following closely on the heels of Jesus. And the major way that we follow Jesus is by actually doing something, doing Christianity. We don't just talk about it and debate about it, but we start to look. We all start to act. We all start to think and speak and live like Jesus. And so would you stand with me as we move into worship? I love worship. I love it. Just kind of we repeat parts in the song and we just have time to reflect. And I love that because I personally, I feel like it's hard to do that during the week. Life is crazy and full and busy, and we have this really unique time right now to just get focused and to reflect on God and who he is, what he's done in our lives, to reflect on our life and take notice of what's stirring inside of us. And so I would invite you to do that this morning as we enter into worship. You can just, God, I do want to know more about you. I love Jesus. How do I sound so cool and all the things he did and ways he served. Help me be more like that. You can pray that to him as we enter in to worship this morning. So would you join me?
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree